Chef Martinez set down his fork and looked around the classroom. In my 25 years in professional kitchens, I've learned that the most important ingredient in any dish is passion. Technical skills can be taught, but passion, real passion, comes from the heart. He gestured toward Maria's plates. This food demonstrates something we try to teach every student but rarely see mastered: the ability to cook with both skill and soul. Every element serves a purpose, every flavor has been considered, and the final result is greater than the sum of its parts. The students stood in stunned silence. Jessica's face had gone from confident to confused to embarrassed in the span of 30 minutes. "Maria," Chef Martinez continued, "I understand you're currently enrolled in our evening program while working during the day?" "Yes, sir," Maria replied. "I work at a small diner downtown to support my children." "I'd like to offer you something," Chef Martinez said. "Our advanced program has an opening for a scholarship student. Full tuition coverage, plus a paid internship at one of our partner restaurants. Are you interested?" Maria felt like the room was spinning. A full scholarship? A paid internship? She had barely dared to dream of completing the basic program, let alone advancing to higher levels. Yes, sir. I would be very honored." Chef Martinez smiled, the first time anyone had seen him smile in class. "The scholarship is yours. Report to my office tomorrow morning to discuss the details." As the head chef left the classroom, the students remained quiet for several moments. Finally, someone started clapping. Then another student joined in, and soon the entire class was applauding. Jessica stood frozen, her face red with shame. She had spent weeks mocking Maria, convinced that her own background and training made her superior. Now she was forced to confront the reality that skill and passion mattered more than pedigree. Brad approached Maria after class. "I owe you an apology," he said genuinely. "I made assumptions about you that were completely wrong. Your food yesterday was incredible." One by one, other students approached Maria to congratulate her or apologize for their earlier behavior. Jessica was the last to speak to her, and her words came out slowly and quietly. "Maria, I was wrong about you. I was so focused on proving I belonged here that I couldn't see how much you actually deserved to be here. I'm sorry for the things I said." Maria looked at Jessica with kindness. "We all have different paths to the same destination. Your training and background are valuable too. We can both succeed without one of us failing." Jessica nodded, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for being more gracious than I deserve." 6 months later, Maria graduated from the advanced program with highest honors. The same classmates who had once mocked her now sought her advice and friendship. Jessica had become one of her closest allies, having learned valuable lessons about humility and respect. Chef Williams attended Maria's graduation ceremony, beaming with pride as she received her certificate. "I knew from that first day of knife work that you had something special," he told her afterward. Maria opened her small restaurant the following year, with Chef Martinez and Chef Williams as her first official customers. The restaurant specialized in elevated comfort food, simple ingredients transformed through skill, creativity, and love. On the wall of her restaurant, Maria hung a simple sign: "Good food comes from the heart. Great food comes from the heart and mind working together." Jessica often brought friends to eat at Maria's restaurant, always telling them the story of how she learned that the most important lessons in cooking and in life sometimes come from the most unexpected teachers. Woman they had once mocked as a charity case had become one of the most respected chefs in the city, proving that talent and determination matter more than background or assumptions. Maria's success reminded everyone that greatness can emerge from anywhere, and that the courage to pursue your dreams despite others' doubts is the most valuable ingredient of all. Chef Williams continued, his voice taking on a different tone than Maria had ever heard in class. "Your soup wasn't just technically perfect, Maria, it had depth, warmth, and character. When I tasted it, I could feel the care that went into every step. That's not something you can learn from a textbook." Maria felt tears welling up in her eyes but tried to stay composed. "Your salmon was cooked exactly right. But more than that, you understood how each element on the plate worked together. The vegetables weren't just side dishes. They were partners in creating a complete experience. And your dessert?" He paused and shook his head. "Simple ingredients transformed into something memorable." "But Chef," Maria said quietly, "the other students have so much more training than I do. They know techniques I've never heard of. Technique can be taught, Maria. What you have is much rarer." Chef Williams walked back to his desk and picked up a folder. "I want to show you something." He opened the folder and pulled out evaluation sheets from yesterday's exam. Jessica's soup, technically adequate, properly thickened, correct temperature. But it tasted like it came from a recipe card. No personality, no spark. He showed her another sheet. Brad's salmon, cooked to the right temperature, seasoned correctly according to classical French technique. But it was boring, safe, forgettable. Then he showed her Maria's evaluation sheet. It was covered in notes much more detailed than the others. "Your soup, perfect balance of sweet and savory. Creative use of coconut milk to add richness without heaviness. Garnish that added both visual appeal and textural contrast. Your salmon, perfectly cooked with herbs that enhanced rather than masked the fish's natural flavor. Vegetables roasted to bring out their individual characters while supporting the main dish." Maria read the detailed comments, amazed at how thoroughly he had analyzed her food. "But what impressed me most," Chef Williams continued, "was that every bite told a story. I could taste the love you put into cooking for your family, the patience you learned from your grandmother, the creativity born from making something special with simple ingredients." The next day brought an unexpected development. The school's head chef, Chef Martinez, visited their class. This was unusual. The head chef rarely observed regular classes unless something special was happening. Chef Williams announced, "Today we have a special visitor. Chef Martinez will be observing our class and may ask some of you to demonstrate specific techniques." Students immediately began whispering excitedly. Being noticed by Chef Martinez was a big deal. He had connections throughout the restaurant industry and could open doors for graduating students. "I'd like to see yesterday's exam results recreated," Chef Martinez announced. "Specifically, I want to taste the top-performing dishes myself." Jessica's face lit up. She was sure this was her chance to prove that Maria's grade had been a mistake. "Chef Martinez will see the real skill levels," she whispered to Brad. Chef Williams called Maria forward. "Please prepare the same menu you made yesterday for your exam." Maria felt all eyes on her as she moved to the cooking station. Her hands were steadier now than they had been during the exam. She had earned her grade honestly, and she knew her food was good. As she began cooking, Chef Martinez watched her technique carefully. He observed how she held her knife, how she seasoned her soup, how she handled the fish. Other students gathered around, some hoping to see her fail under pressure. "Notice her knife work," Chef Martinez commented to Chef Williams, speaking quietly but loud enough for nearby students to hear. "Very clean, efficient movements. No wasted motion." Jessica looked confused. She had expected criticism, not praise. As Maria's soup simmered, the aroma filled the kitchen. Chef Martinez moved closer to observe her seasoning technique. "Tell me about your flavor development," he said to Maria. "I taste as I go," Maria explained while stirring. "The soup base is sweet from the roasted squash, so I balance it with savory elements. The coconut milk adds richness, but I don't want it to overpower the vegetable flavor." Chef Martinez nodded approvingly. "And the garnish?" Toasted pumpkin seeds add crunch and echo the main ingredient. The cream swirl provides visual contrast and a touch of additional richness. Jessica watched in growing amazement as the head chef engaged Maria in detailed discussions about flavor theory and technique. This wasn't how she had imagined this demonstration would go. When Maria finished plating her dishes, Chef Martinez tasted each one carefully, just as Chef Williams had done. His expression remained neutral, but he took multiple bites of each dish and asked detailed questions about preparation methods. The kitchen was completely silent as everyone waited for his verdict. The next morning, Maria arrived at school early as usual. A crowd of students had already gathered around the bulletin board where Chef Williams posted results. She could hear excited chatter and groans of disappointment from the group. "I can't believe I got a C+, Jessica was saying. "My presentation was beautiful." "At least you passed," Brad replied glumly. "I got a C-. Barely made it." Maria waited at the back of the crowd, her heart pounding. Several students pushed past her, some looking relieved, others clearly upset with their grades. She noticed that most scores ranged from C- to B+ with a few failing grades mixed in. Finally, when the crowd thinned out, Maria approached the board. She scanned the list for her name, starting from the bottom where she expected to find it. Her name wasn't there. She looked through the C grades, then the B grades. Still nothing. Confused, she looked at the top of the list. There, in Chef Williams' neat handwriting, she saw Maria Rodriguez, A+. Exceptional work demonstrating mastery of technique, creativity, and most importantly, understanding of flavor. See me after class today. Maria stared at the board in disbelief. She read her name 3 times to make sure she wasn't imagining it. An A+, she was the only student to receive that grade. There must be some mistake, she heard Jessica say behind her. Let me see that again. Jessica pushed forward and saw Maria's grade at the top of the list. Her face went pale, then red with embarrassment and anger. That's impossible, Jessica said loudly. How does someone with no formal training get the highest grade? Chef Williams must have mixed up the papers. Other students gathered around again, drawn by Jessica's outburst. They all stared at the results in shock. Maybe it's a pity grade, Brad suggested. You know, like giving someone a participation trophy. No way, said another student. Chef Williams doesn't do pity grades. He failed 3 people this semester. The whispers and speculation continued throughout the morning. Some students seemed genuinely puzzled. Others appeared angry or jealous. Maria tried to focus on the day's lessons, but she could feel eyes on her constantly. During lunch break, Jessica confronted Maria directly. I don't know how you cheated, but we all know that grade is fake, she said loudly in the cafeteria. My family has been in the restaurant business for generations. I've trained with professional chefs since I was 16. There's no way some housewife beats me in a cooking competition. Maria looked up from her simple sandwich. I didn't cheat, Jessica. I just cooked the best food I knew how to make. Right, Jessica laughed bitterly. And I suppose you're going to tell us that stirring soup for your kids makes you better than someone with actual culinary education? I'm not saying I'm better than anyone, Maria replied calmly. I'm just saying I earned that grade honestly. The cafeteria had gone quiet, with other students listening to every word. Some seemed to be on Jessica's side, nodding in agreement. Others looked uncomfortable with the confrontation. We'll see about that, Jessica said. I'm going to talk to Chef Williams myself. This is ridiculous. After Jessica stormed off, Maria sat alone, her appetite gone. She wondered if maybe there had been a mistake. Perhaps Chef Williams had mixed up papers or names. The doubt crept in despite her confidence in her cooking. The afternoon class was tense. Chef Williams taught as usual, but Maria noticed students looking between her and Jessica frequently. When class ended, most students left quickly, but Jessica lingered, clearly planning to speak with the chef. Maria, Chef Williams called out before Jessica could approach. Please stay. Everyone else may go. Jessica looked frustrated but had no choice but to leave with the others. As the kitchen emptied, Maria approached Chef Williams' desk nervously. You wanted to see me, Chef? Chef Williams set down his papers and looked at her seriously. I imagine you've heard some complaints about your grade today. Yes, sir. Some students think there might have been a mistake. And what do you think? Maria took a deep breath. I think I cooked the best meal I could, but I understand why others are surprised. I don't have the same background as my classmates. Chef Williams walked over to the window and looked out at the courtyard. Maria, I've been teaching for 15 years. I've seen hundreds of students pass through this kitchen. Some have impressive resumes, expensive educations, and famous family connections. He turned back to face her. But yesterday you did something most of them never achieve. You cooked with soul. Time! Chef Williams shouted, and the kitchen fell silent except for heavy breathing and the hum of refrigerators. Students stepped back from their stations, looking exhausted and defeated. Jessica's final plates looked messy and rushed. Brad had managed to complete only 2 courses, his 3rd dish abandoned halfway through. Several other students had dishes that were clearly overcooked or underseasoned. Maria stood quietly behind her 3 perfectly plated courses. Her soup was garnished with a delicate swirl of cream and toasted pumpkin seeds. The salmon glistened with herbs, surrounded by colorful vegetables arranged like a painter's palette. Her chocolate mousse sat in elegant glasses, topped with fresh berries and a mint leaf. Chef Williams began his evaluation, moving from station to station with his clipboard and tasting spoon. He tasted each dish carefully, making notes, his face revealing nothing. Students watched nervously as he sampled their work, some cringing when he paused longer than usual at certain plates. When he reached Jessica's station, she tried to explain her difficulties. Chef, I had some timing issues with the soup, but I think the flavors came together well in the end. Chef Williams tasted her dishes silently. Her soup was thin and lacked seasoning. Her main course was overcooked and dry. Her dessert had curdled slightly. He made brief notes and moved on without comment. Brad attempted humor to cover his nervousness. "Well, chef, I went for quality over quantity. Sometimes less is more, right?" His 2 completed dishes were technically correct but lacked soul and creativity. The flavors were safe but boring. As Chef Williams approached Maria's station, the entire class watched with anticipation. They expected him to quickly taste her amateur food and move on. Some students exchanged glances, already planning their comments about how the charity case had probably made basic comfort food. Chef Williams picked up the spoon for Maria's soup and tasted it slowly. His eyebrows raised slightly. He took another spoonful, then another. He set down the spoon and looked at Maria for the first time during the evaluation. "Tell me about this soup," he said quietly. Maria's voice was steady despite her nerves. "It's butternut squash with roasted garlic, finished with coconut milk and fresh thyme. I roasted the squash until it caramelized slightly to bring out the natural sweetness." Chef Williams nodded and moved to the salmon. He cut a piece and tasted it along with the vegetables. His chewing slowed and he closed his eyes briefly. The fish was perfectly cooked, flaky and moist with herbs that complemented rather than overpowered the natural flavor. "The vegetables?" he asked. "Roasted at high heat to get some char, then finished with lemon and fresh herbs. I wanted them to have their own character while supporting the fish." Finally, Chef Williams tried the chocolate mousse. The texture was silky smooth. The chocolate, rich but not overwhelming, balanced perfectly with the tart berries. It was simple but executed flawlessly. The chef stood at Maria's station longer than any other, making extensive notes. The other students grew restless, whispering among themselves about what was taking so long. "Maybe he's trying to find a nice way to tell her it's not culinary school level," Jessica whispered. "Probably writing down suggestions for improvement," Brad added. Chef Williams finished his notes and looked around the room. "I will post the results tomorrow morning," he announced. Class dismissed. As students filed out, they continued their speculation about Maria's performance. Most assumed she had failed spectacularly, and that Chef Williams was just being kind by taking his time with her evaluation. Maria stayed behind to clean her station thoroughly, as she always did. Chef Williams was organizing his notes at the front of the room when she approached. "Chef, thank you for the opportunity today," she said simply. He looked up at her with an expression she couldn't read. "Maria," he said, "where did you learn to cook?" "From my grandmother and from feeding my family every day for 20 years, she replied honestly. Chef Williams nodded slowly. "I see. Have a good evening." Maria left the kitchen wondering if she had just failed her most important test. Chef Williams placed the carrot piece back on Maria's cutting board without saying a word. He made a long note on his clipboard and moved to the next station. Maria couldn't read his expression, but she noticed a slight nod before he walked away. "Well, that was awkward," Jessica whispered to her friends. "He probably doesn't want to embarrass her in front of everyone." The next few weeks followed the same pattern. Each class brought new challenges, and each time, Maria faced the same mockery from her classmates. When they learned sauce making, Jessica loudly commented, "I hope she doesn't poison anyone with her amateur attempts." During the pastry week, another student named Brad made jokes about Maria's peasant cooking background. He told everyone how his family owned 3 restaurants and how he had been around professional kitchens since childhood. "Some people are born for this," Brad said while struggling with his croissant dough. "Others should stick to making sandwiches at home." Maria ignored the comments and focused on her work. She watched Chef Williams carefully during demonstrations, took detailed notes, and practiced every technique until her hands moved automatically. While other students socialized after class, Maria stayed behind to clean equipment and ask questions. Chef Williams rarely spoke to any student individually, but Maria noticed he sometimes watched her work longer than the others. She couldn't tell if this was good or bad, so she simply continued doing her best. The real test came during the 4th week when Chef Williams announced a surprise practical exam. "You will prepare a complete 3-course meal," he explained. "You have 3 hours and you must work alone. This exam counts for 50% of your grade." Students began panicking immediately. They had practiced individual techniques but never a complete meal under pressure. Jessica's confident smile disappeared as she realized the challenge ahead. "What kind of cuisine should we make?" asked one student. "Whatever you do best," Chef Williams replied. "Show me who you really are as a cook." Maria felt a strange calmness wash over her. While others frantically flipped through their notes and recipe books, she closed her eyes and thought about the meals she had cooked for her children. She remembered Sunday dinners with her grandmother, holiday feasts prepared with love, and simple weeknight meals made special with care. When the exam began, chaos erupted in the kitchen. Students rushed around grabbing ingredients, bumping into each other, and arguing over equipment. Jessica burnt her first attempt at soup and had to start over. Brad's elaborate appetizer fell apart when he tried to plate it. Maria moved through the kitchen like she was dancing. She had planned her menu carefully: a warm butternut squash soup with homemade bread, herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables, and a simple but elegant chocolate mousse with fresh berries. "Look at her acting like she owns the place," Jessica muttered while struggling with her second soup attempt, probably making some basic home cooking and thinking it's gourmet. Other students were too focused on their own disasters to pay much attention to Maria. The kitchen filled with smoke from burnt dishes, the sound of pans clattering and occasional curse words from frustrated students. Maria worked steadily, tasting and adjusting as she went. Her soup simmered perfectly while her bread rose in the oven. She prepared her fish with confident hands, seasoning it just right. Her dessert was already chilling in the refrigerator, while others were still struggling with their main courses. As the final hour approached, the stress in the room became unbearable. Some students were near tears, others had given up entirely. Maria plated her dishes with artistic care, making sure every element was perfectly placed. Maria walked into the cooking classroom with shaking hands. At 45 years old, she felt completely out of place among the younger students. Her worn-out dress and old shoes made her stand out even more. The other students were already chatting and laughing together, but Maria sat alone in the back corner. "Look who decided to join us," whispered Jessica, a 20-something girl with perfectly styled hair. "Doesn't she know this is an advanced cooking class, not a charity kitchen?" The group around Jessica giggled quietly, but loud enough for Maria to hear. Maria pretended not to notice and focused on arranging her few cooking tools. She had saved money for months to afford this class. Her dream was simple: to open a small restaurant and provide for her 2 children after her husband left them with nothing but debt. When Chef Williams entered the room, everyone became quiet. He was known as one of the toughest instructors in the culinary school. His sharp eyes scanned the room, stopping briefly at Maria before moving on. "Today we start with basic knife skills," he announced. "I want to see what you all think you know." He handed out identical sets of vegetables to each student. "You have 30 minutes to prepare these ingredients properly." Maria picked up her knife with confidence. Years of cooking for her family had taught her well, but she had never learned the fancy techniques these culinary students probably knew. Around her, students began chopping with practiced movements, their knives dancing across cutting boards. "This should be interesting," Jessica muttered, glancing at Maria's station. "I wonder if she even knows which end of the knife to hold." As Maria began cutting, she noticed the other students watching her. Some shook their heads, others smiled mockingly. She could feel their judgment like a heavy weight on her shoulders. But she continued working, focusing on each cut, remembering how her grandmother had taught her to respect every ingredient. The timer ticked away as students rushed to finish their preparations. Some were struggling, their cuts uneven and sloppy in their hurry. Maria worked steadily, taking her time with each piece, making sure everything was cut precisely and evenly. "Time's up," Chef Williams called out. "Step back from your stations." The chef began walking around the room, examining each student's work. He made notes on his clipboard, occasionally nodding or frowning. When he reached Jessica's station, she stood proudly beside her cutting board. "Adequate," he said simply, then moved on. Jessica's smile faded slightly. As he approached Maria's station, the room grew quieter. Other students stretched their necks to see what the charity case had produced. Chef Williams stopped at her cutting board and stared down at her work for a long moment. The vegetables were cut into perfect, uniform pieces. Every carrot stick was exactly the same size. The onions were diced so precisely, they looked like tiny cubes of art. The herbs were chopped so finely they resembled green powder. Chef Williams picked up one of the carrot pieces and examined it closely. The silence in the room was deafening. Maria held her breath, waiting for his judgment while the other students waited to see her fail.